Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am one of their many hosts on the platform, Ethan, and we usually do this. Comes out on Monday, I record on Sunday. You all know what the time is. If you've been here, you know what it's like, you know what's going on. I hope everybody's staying safe. I, for one, have been trying my hardest to stay safe and also, be mindful that things are moving slowly but surely back to a normaler asterisk start to our regular day life again. People are starting to open up their businesses. People are starting to go seemingly back to work. I guess I don't really see people going back to work, at least not in the normal way. But businesses that didn't shut down are still working as with the new guidelines and how to be able to still work. And previous businesses that were temporarily closed have started to reopen, and restaurants are definitely coming back into the forefront as, grocery stores were already open and things like that. And just everybody's planning these social distance things. So we'll just see what goes on, man. For me, life is continuing forward. Can't see what I'm wearing right now, but I'm wearing this watermelon shirt. That just means life is good. I guess right now life is doing well. I feel like we're going to get better and better as the days go on, and trying to keep an optimistic mindset with also knowing that, things always can change and fluctuate. So, never keep yourself on your toes, man, and just stay safe because you never know. Also, shout out to Patrick Ewing. Hope he's feeling better. As he was recently diagnosed with COVID-19. So just another reminder that it's just because things are opening up doesn't mean that the virus has just somehow left our stratosphere, left our world. It's still very much real, and thus why we should be careful. Speaking of coronavirus, it's affecting all of college sports, not just football, but just basically everything involved with the college atmosphere. And it possibly can affect how the academic calendars work around winter sports and the end of college football season, as we would think. So on Monday, Notre Dame announced that it's going to start its fall semester early, canceling fall break and ending the semester before Thanksgiving. And this came after South Carolina announced a similar move, and it looks like this is going to be a step that a lot of different colleges around the country are going to do. So Creighton and Marquette are also condensing their fall academic schedules, and I think more universities are going to follow suit. So the idea of this, of course, is that flu season typically is around Thanksgiving, around that early winter time where things are starting to get colder. People are starting to get the sniffles. People are going to start to coughing, cough, achooes. You're going to get some of those a lot more at that moment in time. And thus, we won't have projectedly a vaccine for COVID-19 at that point. So the cases are probably going to hit another bump at that point in time. So the plan is you don't want a whole bunch of people going to classes at that same time and being in the same place and also bringing it home with them. So you send them home early, complete, and while they finish their classes, at home, over the internet, over Zoom, or whatever the case may be, and take their finals over the internet online, it's to limit, contact with the virus on a large scale. So that's really that's the logic. It makes sense to me, at least. And when you look at it from a football perspective, around Thanksgiving, around that time, a lot of the last regular season games will be played at that point. So you'll be close to the end of the season. So here comes the ethical question. You're going to keep these guys in sports while everybody else who is a student, because these guys, remember, these are student athletes, quote unquote, but these guys probably would stay, which I mean isn't out of the normal if you really think about it, because they have to report early to campus, usually for summer workouts, or they have to, if they're a winter sport, they definitely have winter workouts beforehand, before the season kicks off. So this is something that isn't going to be out of the norm for the athlete, but I'm sure there's going to be talking points about this isn't normal circumstances, and are we putting these guys more at risk because they have to go take a flight somewhere to go play in a bowl game halfway across the country that they have no idea what the vibe is like, what the symptom count might be, or not symptom count, sorry, what the case counts might be, or just how's the spread going, or how is the social distancing going. So I can only imagine that people are not going to be sitting well with this at first, and it's going to take some getting used to and thought process and all that. As far as winter sports go, they're the ones that are going to have a lot of the trouble, considering that most people in winter sports, so basketball, you have your volleyball, I believe, is a winter sport, and you'll come into, well, some people say winter sports, some people say spring sports. So winter sport is definitely basketball, but then it moves on into spring sports, and then you have your soccers and all this, but they start early on, and of course, your baseball too. So when those two things happen, all these people that have to come and practice at this point in time, how is that going to affect, how is this campus opening early thing affect them? So there's going to be tournaments, and, they have invitationals that they probably won't be able to do. So if everything is on lockdown by like November 25, should basketball, football, maybe even early baseball be shut down too? And I think they're really trying to think of creative, responsible ways to get sports back, and I guess to bring a semblance of normal back. But it's really hard that there's going to be no easy way of really making this all sound good, because at this point, everybody's talking about, of course, June is now the new start date for when campuses and universities can start letting the student athletes come back and do summer workouts. So, for example, we're going to talk about in the next segment coming up soon about the SEC doing it, and then just how that's going to affect everything and see how that goes. But the idea of universities trying to open early, it's a good concept, right? It makes sense. It's a good thing to do because it's the most responsible thing to do. But at the same time, we do have to wonder how this is going to affect the athletes. So it's a lot of things up in the air on that front, because on one end you can look at it from a perspective of somebody who's trying to make as much revenue for the university as possible, and then on the other end you can look at it from a safety standpoint. Is this going to be the most secure thing to do? Is this the most is this the most risk versus cost scenario that would be the least amount of risk to their potential, their students, because they're not their players, but, they're not their employees, so to speak. Their students are at risk. They don't play this game for money. Of course, they don't get paid to do this. They may be on scholarship or anything like that, but at the end of the day, it's not like their livelihood depends directly to playing college football at the moment in time, or playing the game of football. So I'd have to imagine that some people are going to find themselves uncomfortable in a situation where they have to go play in the Outback Bowl, and coronavirus is starting to spike up again in cases, and people are getting a little bit worried, and the masks are starting to really start coming back out and things like that. So it's going to be really interesting what the next few months bring, because as universities reopen and as life starts to functionally seem normal again, we all know in the back of our mind that this thing isn't over, and it won't be over for quite some time, really, until a vaccine that has been rigorously tested and potentially even pushed to, manufacturing without factoring, if this is a dud, that the manufacturers will just eat the cost, or the United States would just eat the cost and just manufacture it out because it's necessary. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to talk about the SEC's role in all of this.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So before going into break, I briefly touched on what the SEC has decided to do, as the NCAA has basically lifted the moratorium period that expires on May 31st. So some conferences don't have league-wide bans, and of course others do. And not everybody functions on the same level because states have also different opening requirements and laws that are in place right now that are restricting them from starting what the SEC is trying to do. But the SEC is allowing student athletes to return to campus starting June 8th. So it was voted on Friday, and it's the latest step within been a week of positivity surrounding the college football return. So, of course, SEC is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Power 5 conferences in college football. And, of course, we see things like the SEC decision makers' opinions on the return date varied from school to school, and some programs had plans to open safely before this date of June was already in place. So, and they wanted to do it as early as June 1st, but people who wanted to do it at June 8th was Missouri, Texas A&M, and Florida. Others were looking at a slower pace, so something around probably later on in the same month. But, you know, the SEC has 11 schools in it. So, you know, nationally, states opening back up are on different timelines because not every state is dealing with the same amount of cases, dealing with the same amount of deaths, tolls, and all of that. So it's some states are being more patient than others when it comes to starting back up and reopening. So, for example, the gyms are open in Florida and Georgia, while Kentucky hasn't opened restaurants yet, and Kentucky is reopening later than any other SEC school state and phasing in the approach this week, while the state like South Carolina begins the loosening guidelines a month ago. So it's all different places. And the Tennessee athletic director, Philip Fermer, was an outlier against the early return date. Several programs held a similar thought. According to those with knowledge of the discussion, administrators were debating among several dates, most notably June 1st, June 8th, June 15th. And according to the guidelines the league released, the SEC will only require virus testing for those showing symptoms. However, schools may have stricter policies, and Florida announced they would test athletes at the start of workouts. And honestly, what Florida is doing makes way more sense than which is a first, right? You know, and I don't mean Florida the school, but I mean Florida the state. Everybody knows the jokes about Florida being the wild state of the bunch and all that. But Florida does sound like they're doing at least more, they seem a little bit more cautious and understanding that this is something that they're going to have to really at least look like this is going to be rigorous, that they're going to test these guys coming in and out. So that way we don't add to the spread, which is smart. It makes sense. And I'm sure there's some sort of protection that these universities are getting if players start to catch coronavirus or they start to spread it to others and things like that. Because you have to remember, just because they come back for workouts, this can't be the only place they're going to go. You know, they're back on campus. Of course, they're probably going to be around each other a lot more than just practice, realistically, right? They're probably going to be, they might live together. They may be hanging out in dorms. And all it takes is a few people to just feel like they can just, you know, they're invincible or they can do whatever they want to do. And they go out somewhere where they really have no business being, and then they may test positive, but they don't know, or they be asymptomatic and just start carrying stuff for a few days or a few weeks. And somebody may not be asymptomatic, and then all of a sudden there's a problem. Like, we have to remember that we are on kind of unprecedented ground with all of this stuff. So we have to taper our optimism of football coming back, because right now it looks like football, even basketball, is set to come back potentially in July. So sports are making their way back, but just because sports are trying to make their way back doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to start coming back piece by piece really as rapidly, because we're these big money industries like sports and entertainment, they are figuring out how to keep the bottom line going with as much risk factoring in, and, you know, health and safety is a big priority, and they're factoring all of this stuff in, right? So at the end of the day, you do have to realize that these industries are way different than what we see on a daily basis. So just because we think that the NBA is coming back doesn't mean that everything else is going to come back, especially depending on what your industry is known for. So if you are, say you work in like a promotions department and you hand out pamphlets and give out prizes all day and you sit outside of a tent, right? You're one of those. You're one of a brand ambassador or something like that. You aren't probably, I don't expect that you'll be out and about really for the next, still in the summer. I don't see it happening. For one, people aren't going to be susceptible to take your prizes anyway or be involved with what you have going on. Two, an example of this is that a lot of the radio business is built off of concerts and giving giveaways to concert tickets and events. And for the most part, all events are in limbo to either cancel and postpone to 2021. There's no events to do. So you would just, the likelihood of you going back to work right now would be kind of low. And for some people who aren't technically essential workers, they face similar things. So like people who do freelance work in the entertainment world or anything like that, who basically thrive on human interaction and human contact and things like that, just now are slowly trying to get out of that. Like, we just got haircuts. People are just now starting to get their haircuts. So it's starting to really, really slowly pick up, but not for everybody. So let's bring this back to the SEC and everything and wrap this up for this segment. Many schools have created safety plans to welcome back their athletes, and it's from a wide slew of schools that have already announced reopening. So like Wyoming plans to start June 1st. Louisville will join Ohio State and begin working out June 8th. And workouts are voluntary. So with any coaching interaction prohibited, those strength coaches can be present to supervise. And in a normal summer, athletes can spend 8 hours a week with interaction from their staff, 2 hours with on-field coaches, and 6 with strength staffers. And this all will begin, that will all begin in early July. So we're really starting to get the ball moving when it comes to this college football season. So now I'm very excited because we maybe be able to have some content that doesn't always revolve around the coronavirus. That's wishful thinking. It probably won't go away, but maybe we'll at least be able to talk about preview matchups and things like that and not have to worry about talking about stuff in vain all the time, because that's something that I do worry about, that maybe I am talking a little bit too much in vain about stuff that may not really come to full fruition. And then, of course, you have to worry about the third year guys who want to declare the draft. Do they even get to play? But it looks like we're definitely headed towards a situation where these guys are going to play on the field. And knowing them, they probably do want to play because ball players like to play the game. And that's typically the bottom line. So we may get to see just how all this stuff works out at the end of the day. But we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to start coming in with just some random news of the day.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Okay, so we do have some transfer news. So you may know this guy. He is the little brother of one of the more infamous college football quarterbacks of recent time, or maybe even all time. Had one of the more interesting college football runs. And this is an all-encompassing freak of a talent that came out to the NFL, was drafted number 1 overall, right? He was number 1 overall, and the rest was kind of history. Made it to a Super Bowl, won MVP, is very, very much a big-time dancer and into fashion. Likes to flex by using superhero-themed celebrations. Okay, I think we all know. Cam Newton's younger brother, Kalen, is transferring to the same school of where, Cam Newton went. So, Kalen has spent the last 3 years at Howard, and he quickly found some success. He had 5,061 yards passing, 45 touchdowns, 29 interceptions, and he also rushed for 1,257 yards and 16 touchdowns. So he announced that he was going to enter the transfer portal on October 1st, 2019. And he played 4 games in 2019, throwing for 815 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's not as big as Cam. He's 6 foot, 195, and he'll be a walk-on at Auburn as he has 2 years of eligibility left. But Auburn currently has 3 scholarship quarterbacks on roster, so there's really no telling what this could mean for him. They still have returning starter in the sophomore year, Bo Nix, so there's really no telling what this could mean. But a transfer is a transfer, and he made the decision that he felt was best for him. Speaking of another transfer, Jaron Jones transfers from Mississippi State to Ole Miss. So this is very interesting. As you know, they are rival schools, and that's typically something that seems a little bit sacrilege in a sense. But the defensive back is transferring to Ole Miss. He announced Saturday on Twitter, and he was expected to compete for the starting safety spot in Mississippi State this year, but just ended up with just 1 game while appearing in 11. So he was a 4-star recruit coming out of Northwest Ranking High School, and he was the number 18 ranked safety in the nation in 2019. So during his final 2 years of high school, he recorded 70 tackles, 7 interceptions, as well as dipping his toe in the offensive side of the ball for a casual 1,772 yards and 26 touchdowns. Casual. So the reason why he was recruited to come there can be credited to his position coach, apparently. So Terrell Buckley is the cornerbacks coach at Ole Miss, and he recruited Jones to MSU when he was a DB's coach there from 2016 to 2019. So there's that little connection that you would expect. How this thing always kind of works out. You know, there's always connections that get made along the way that people don't take too much into consideration all the time. You make connections every single day in your life. And with those connections, you never know what outcomes can be made, what sort of relationships can be made, what sort of business opportunities, life opportunities. You never know what can come out of a quality relationship with somebody you meet. So that's why you always try to keep your best foot forward. You always try to keep things, you try to keep water under the bridge and not burn the bridge. Don't burn the bridge. So that way, maybe an opportunity arises and knocks on your door, and things can really start to fall in thy favor. All right. Other things in the news, Ohio State is still going to play. They're operating as if they're going to play like we talked about earlier, but will it be with fans, with limited fans, or without fans? So we don't know that for sure, but it's going to be very difficult for Ohio State fans to find tickets, and because we don't know what's going to happen. And I mean, this isn't just an Ohio State problem. This is an everything problem. Everybody's finding this hard, but Ohio State is planning to bring football players back June 8th so they can begin workouts. And, this gets people thinking that they'll be able to bring people in. Athletic director Gene Smith said Thursday, models that observe the state of Ohio's recommended 6-foot separation radius would cut out the typical Saturday crowd at the Horseshoe from 2,000 to 22,000, and it would be from 105,000 plus to 2,000 to 20,000. So, wow, my tongue is getting tied there. So, obviously, that's a drastic amount of people cut down, and that's just if they're allowed to have fans at all. The best scenario that all this would work out is the idea that the national solution and there's some consistency, and having all 14 schools in the Big Ten playing would be best. But it's very possible that that's not going to happen because, every state has different rules and different guidelines on opening. So we don't know whether all Big Ten schools must play college football. Some may not have to. And we're not sure how this affects Ohio State. So say how they're going to operate if somebody tests positive for coronavirus while during working out in the facilities. But at the end of the day, people want to play, and people are going to find a way to play, and the kids want to play, and we all recognize that as such. To close this segment out, I want to give everybody a solid reminder here. A reminder that just 2 weeks ago, we really were not too certain how college football was going to come back. Of course, athletic directors, people who run different conferences, the president, people had mixed bag feelings on how all of this was going to play out. And we did not know if, one, we'd have college football at all, two, if we'd have college football on a limited schedule basis, if we were just doing not in-state, but if we were just doing in-conference play. And now we have really rapidly moved towards going to just play college football, the whole schedule, the regular amount, at least for most teams. I feel like other places are kind of slowly bringing themselves to that ideology. Of course, you have really still bad situations there, like in New York, and bigger states like California are going to have different guidelines and necessities to follow. in order to really fulfill what they feel is falling under safety and health guidelines from the CDC and from the government and things like that. But for other states, things are moving at a kind of a rapid pace as far as when it comes to sports coming back and people working out in facilities and things like that. So it's really, really taking off on its own. And honestly, I was not, you could have asked me 2 weeks ago and been like, hey, Ethan, how do you feel about college sports potentially not happening? I would have been like, it's a high possibility that it just doesn't happen. It was a real high possibility. And now it's looking like no matter I guess they've calculated all the risk and they feel like this is the best course of action for us to continue moving forward with college sports and sports in general. So we'll just see what the wind goes, because right now we're on a good streak of 2 weeks, but we all know how that can kind of downtrot and downspur. But, positive thoughts, positive thinking, you got to see it before you see it. That's what my old high school coach used to tell me. We had that on shirts, I believe. You got to see it before you see it. But we're going to wrap this segment up and we're going to get into some more NCAA rules coming to fruition.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So the one-time transfer rule has been a topic of conversation for the past couple months now, and it was looking like it was making some quality progress, and then all of a sudden the coronavirus happened for the U.S. in an abrupt fashion to where now it is starting to look like we are not going to see it in the near future. So a proposed one-time transfer waiver that would allow college students to transfer and be immediately eligible at their at their new school has been turned down until at least 2021-2022 academic year. And the NCAA announced on Wednesday that the news was originally reported by Brett Murphy of Stadium. So in its release, the NCAA stated its intent to adopt legislation that creates uniform, modernized rules governing eligibility after transfer for student athletes in all sports. And this change would aim to achieve the same goal that the waiver proposal would, and it's only through a lengthier process. So current Division I rules prevent student athletes, of course, to playing baseball, men's and women's basketball, football, and men's ice hockey to immediately play after their first transfer. And while the rule waiver may have expedited the process of changing this, the NCAA is favoring a more thorough approach to adjusting its transfer rules. So the transfer rule, as some people would say, the transfer environment has long been an issue of much discussion in Division I, and Division I Council is committed to a uniform and equitable approach to transfer rules that considers student athlete well-being and the opportunities available after transfer. So this is the council chair of the NCAA Division I. So athletic directors at Pennsylvania and transfer waiver support group chair. This is Mr. M. Grace Calhoun. So he also says, we will not simply change the rule, but we will consider a comprehensive package designed to address the multiple complexities involved. So In late April, the board of directors released a statement saying its changes to the NCAA's waiver process are not appropriate at this time. So, of course, you know what the time is. It's been impacted by COVID-19 in interim period. So, board members recommend that the waiver process be sensitive to student athlete well-being. Because of this, the board agreed to lift the moratorium on transfer legislation for the 2021 legislative cycle, but recommended to the council that changes to the waiver process as suggested by the working group are not appropriate. The possibility of a one-time transfer rule getting adopted in the future still exists, of course, but the NCAA lifted the transfer legislation moratorium per Brian Fisher, meaning that the rule will be voted on at the NCAA convention in January. So, of course, for now, any scholar athlete that transfers without receiving some form of exception, graduate transfer, family hardship waiver, and discontinued program exception will still have to sit out a year. So, like we said earlier, Cam Newton's brother is going to have to sit out a year. Our young man, who was a defensive back previously for Mississippi State, is going to have to sit out a year. That does not change at all right now, which is kind of sad. And, you know, it was the easy way for the NCAA to kind of cop out and have a scapegoat here and just say the timing is bad. The COVID-19 situation is what we should be focusing on as far as, you know, thinking about what's best for the players in this situation. You know, maybe for the first time ever, they're deciding to think what's best for the players. And honestly, I don't know, to me, this seems like another form of NCAA slow footing the bill, so to speak. They're just trying to pedal along. They don't, but then again, there's a thing here that the NCAA does have a small point on. Let's keep in mind, we don't want kids transferring left and right to different universities after 1 year, right? They're trying to consider that we can't just open up Pandora's box to where, oh, a kid thought he was going to be a true freshman and he's not liking the experience of not starting, or he hasn't really given it a full shot, and then all of a sudden he wants to go transfer out of a program that recruited him. But he goes to this new program and it's more of the same, or he's still not experiencing there, and now he basically would have missed 2 years worth of college football instead of just staying at one university or just sitting out to see just how this is going to work, this, that, and the third. So from that perspective, I definitely can see a reasoning for wanting to really get this correct and not just make this a one and done rule, so to speak, where you get one-time transfer, you can do it at any point in time in your college career. That can get a little bit dicey. Now, I don't think a year restriction besides, you know, playing the first year is necessary, right? I don't think that you need any other restriction for when someone can transfer. In fact, there isn't. But as far as the one transfer rule goes, there shouldn't be that either. It should still function the same way. You can transfer after your first year, and that should be the end of it. The thing about it is they have to look at it from a situational standpoint from each individual player, I suppose, and have to figure out how to grant it. Now, say this is going to be good for quarterbacks who kind of have to make the most out of their career as fast as possible in this current age of football in America. You only have about two years to, if you transfer, 2 years really to maximize your potential coming into NFL, if that's what your goal is. Because if you don't play the first year, you get redshirted, you aren't getting very much play time at all. You figure that your career is slowly pedaling towards a direction that it's not going to be going for. Or maybe the program brings in another quarterback who looks to be like a 5-star guy who's really, really talented, and you don't think you're going to be able to fight for the starting job. So you transfer and you go to somewhere that may be looking for a quarterback because 5-star quarterbacks just aren't around. Like, we have to reframe our mind here, or reframe our thinking and approach to all of this, because at the end of the day, they don't know when they're going to get the next guy at the quarterback position. You never know. So it's better to get somebody that, you've already seen in college, you have some tape on, and maybe they actually liked, or maybe they were going to try and recruit them anyway. Or maybe, of course, a coach from the previous program who may have recruited that player there decides to go to another place and sees an opportunity to go get somebody that they already scouted. They don't have to essentially, work too hard in the recruiting standpoint, because they kind of already recruited beforehand, so to speak. So it's kind of like they had recruited on the back end, and it wasn't an immediate payoff, but now maybe they get something out of it. But for quarterbacks, this makes the one-time transfer rule is so useful, because now you don't have to wait, of course, a whole nother year. But maybe it would be nice to wait a whole nother year to learn the system. But to be honest, if you're a quarterback, you kind of have to learn the system pretty quickly anyway. So sitting under your coach, you're going to have to do that anyway. So why wait and waste another year of eligibility, so to speak, and probably have to go into your senior year. And then if you don't get it done by then, you're probably going to have to grad transfer out and go play somewhere else. So how does this also affect the grad transfer rule, right? If you already used your one-time transfer, can you transfer to a grad program and still be able to play without any restriction? We don't know. Of course, maybe that's why they're trying to take some time to figure this all out. But my stance on this. I think the one-time transfer rule is the appropriate rule to have. It is a rule that should have been happening for a long time now. And at the end of the day, these kids, so to speak, they're still kids, but at the same time, they're still adults. They still have the age of adult making decisions that they can do. So I think you should be allowed to make your adult decisions. If you feel like this is the best move for you, you've discussed it with multiple people, and you're not just going off on, one bad season and just calling it quits, I think you should have the right to transfer out. All right. So let's take another break, and we're going to talk a little bit about some previous LSU locker room antics.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So we all know about Joe Burrow and his various ways of showing moxie, poise, toughness, bravado, all the different types of ways you can describe Joe Burrow. We all know why this happens, and sometimes everybody kind of gains respect for Joe Burrow at a different point in his timeline at LSU that did happen. So let's say, for example, you watched him in 2019, right? It was a kind of a struggle going on there. The offense was kind of wishy-washy. It wasn't always coming together. And you watched Joe Burrow at the Fiesta Bowl versus UCF. So they started off really, really bad. There was a lot of things going on, and they were down pretty hard against UCF. And then Joe Burrow takes this super big hit that looked like it should have laid him on the ground for good. Like he really got hit hard. And this seems to be something that is a bit of a calling card of Joe Burrow. He gets hit hard on the ground, I guess. But he gets back up and shakes it off and then proceeds to really just start to turn it on. And he really figures some things out, and they end up coming back to win this game like 42 to 32, or I'm sorry, 40 to 32, if I remember correctly. And they end the 25 game winning streak of UCF last year or 2 years ago. Then we come into 2020 and we see what he's able to do throughout the season, playing really hard. You know, people are coming after him. They're definitely throwing the kitchen sink near the second half of the season for sure. He's really going up against some high caliber defensive competition. Guys are really sending the heat, sending blitzes, this, that, and the third. You know, Clemson definitely tried to send a whole bunch of blitzes his way. Alabama was definitely a tough contest for sure. It really, really tested Joe Burrow, I think, the most was Alabama, because they just were relentless. You know, it was the monkey on LSU's back. They haven't beaten Alabama in about 8 years at that point. And they really, really needed this win, because if they didn't beat Alabama, the season was basically for naught. It was for nothing. And Joe Burrow delivered a master class of quarterbacking in the college football sense, and really, really got the job done that day. And a lot of people, especially national media, really gained. That's when they fell in love with Joe Burrow at that point. If it wasn't that, it was also that, of course, that gorgeous video that one of the video team students for the campus came up with their Sony A7 III. And, you know, he had the Burrow, but spelled with the EAUX instead of, you know, his actual name, that was just the hardest thing I saw all year. That still gives me chills to this day. It's very Louisiana-esque to do something like that. And it was just really cool to see, like, in Death Valley. And that's what college football is all about. Storylines, and, you know, college football is where heroes are made, because not everybody is going to end up being a good NFL prospect, being a good NFL player. But in college football, all it takes is one play, 1 year to really make a difference on people. And you'll be remembered forever. Like, Johnny Manziel still, to this day, is looked at as a Texas A&M legend. Like, yeah, his career did not go the way it needed to go. He's still very much in an interesting place in his life. But if you want to remember Johnny Manziel the best, it was at Texas A&M, where he was a legend. Tim Tebow's career didn't go the way he wanted it to go. Granted, Tim Tebow's fine. He's a great guy from what I hear and what I've seen on television. But, of course, his football career kind of got derailed abruptly in the NFL, and it wasn't really that good at the start anyway. But in college football, he's one of the most winningest quarterbacks ever, under one of the more storied runs in college football ever, with one of the most storied coaches ever. It's just he's tied to Urban Meyer. He's tied to that Florida team, that Florida program at the time. It's just legendary stuff. And LSU is no different, except for the fact that it was only really 1 year with Joe Burrow. But I like to count the first year, because I think that was the building blocks of what we came to see. Another thing that was just released recently about Joe Burrow is the fact that he earned his teammates' respect in a kind of a Disney 90s football movie sense. So he earned it in a fight. So during a LSU practice, Joe Burrow and the offense were really, really dominating the defense, and the defense was not really happy about all this dominating during practice. So in retaliation, safety Jacoby Stevens came after Burrow off the edge on a red zone blitz and took him out. Basically, heat-seek missiled him to the ground, and the hit was so hard that Joe Burrow's helmet came off. Joe Burrow then, of course, replied by getting up, like Joe Burrow likes to do. He'll get up, and he approached him really with a lot of aggression and took his face mask, and apparently the whole team jumped in and got in on a brawl, and the only person that was sitting out was Adrian Maggie, who was sitting out for a water break. So one of the LSU staff members, Torrey Carter, comes in like a heat-seeking missile and takes somebody out. He can't remember who, though. So according to Brody Miller, who ended up writing the story for The Athletic, many players from the 2019 LSU team point to this moment as the time Joe Burrow first earned their respect. So this is the first time he earned their respect, I guess. He didn't back down, and Jacoby, he thinks, respected him after that, one person said. And the team, of course, went on to win 15-0 during the season behind that best offense in the nation. And Joe Burrow set the single season touchdown record with 60 touchdowns during the year. And he was chosen, of course, number 1 overall by the Cincinnati Bengals. So what does this mean for his NFL career? Well, I don't really know, because it's hard to put what you used in college to translate to the NFL. I will say, though, he does look like a really, really great NFL quarterback prospect. He does have a little bit tendency of getting gun happy, and he'll have an open read and he'll just say screw it and pass it to somebody else downfield. He likes the long ball. He may have a little Brett Favre in him, possibly, and I think he has a lot of confidence. So adding all that up, I think he'll be a great quarterback in the NFL. Well, what would that mean for the locker room, though? Because I don't know if Joe Burrow wants to get into more fights, especially with NFL guys who are a lot bigger, badder, and fights can lead to a lot of different stuff. But fighting happens all the time, so I'm sure it's not out of the culture for all these guys who are lifting weights, super hopped up on adrenaline and testosterone, that things aren't going to get heated. Some guys are really passionate about the game and all this, that, and the third. But I think Joe Burrow has a way of galvanizing people behind him, and it's in his own special way. If it's not, getting to a fight, it's taking a big hit and standing up and handling like a champ and then coming back and scoring, or maybe it's being involved in a shooting contest amongst different players. And he just decides to say, I'm going to be the best player on the court today, and I'm just going to shoot out the lights out. Remember that story where he was in it was a free throw or a 3-point shooting contest? One of the two. It was a shooting contest, and he definitely held it down and won it for his team. And he even said now he's so confident that he feels if he could be in the NBA right now, all it would take him to do is practice shooting a corner 3 ball for about a year, and he could be in the NBA. So he has that much confidence in himself and exudes that much confidence overall, and I think a lot of people gravitate to that, and I think it's part of his charisma, his charm, and everything that includes it. So it really, really does look like he is set for great things, and I think it really started off from the ground up here in LSU, and that's just awesome to see. Hopefully his career does not have trajectory points as other college grounds legends and things like that. But we're going to take our final break, and we're going to get back to the Big Ten as we're going to look at some of the top 10 players coming into the 2020 season.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Okay, so to finish off today's podcast, I wanted to tap into some top 10 players, supposedly, that are left in the Big Ten. So the Big Ten does have a lot of interesting players and a lot of good teams within their respective conference. Of course, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio State, for example. Penn State, can't forget about them either. Penn State is a really good school as well. So, of course, leading off, top 10 players returning to the Big Ten in 2020. The Ohio State Buckeyes have a lot of players on this list, and of course, number one is Justin Fields. So they write, while Trevor Lawrence is the best returning quarterback and player in college football, Ohio State signal caller Justin Fields is right behind him. He had a 92.5 passer rating in 2019, trailed only soon to be first overall pick Joe Burrow. Rarely did Fields show up and struggle in a game. In fact, in 2 of his 14 games, did he have a passer rating below 70? And Fields' accuracy is exactly what you want in a quarterback. When removing passes behind the line of scrimmage, he ranked top 10 in lowest rates of uncatchable passes thrown. He benefited from having a great group of receivers who could separate at high level, but doesn't mean he wasn't responsible for a lot of those Buckeyes' success. He could create outside of the structure or could touch the defense from a clean pocket. When inside a clean pocket, Fields was barely edged out by Joe Burrow in passing grade and was routinely throwing strikes down the field, posting 24 big-time throws and only 3 turnover-worthy plays. Next on the list is another quarterback, Tanner Morgan from Minnesota. So Tanner Morgan, in the middle of the 2018 season, was the first time we saw him, and he was filled in as a starter for the remainder of the season and was not so great in those starts. As a result, he was a bit of a shock to see Morgan play at the level he did in 2019. He was the 9th most valuable FBS quarterback and among the 5 most valuable returning in 2020. The way Morgan handled pressure was a complete 180 from the year prior. He ranked only behind Joe Burrow in Pro Football Focus passing grade on those type of plays. So pressure is installable year to year. So when we expect Morgan to regress in this facet we don't expect him to completely drop off because he showed a lot of promise on the things that are already predictive of future success, such as performance in a clean pocket when free from pressure. Morgan produced a positively graded play rate that was second in the FBS and among returning signal callers, barely edging out Justin Fields. On top of that, he posted the 3rd lowest rate of uncatchable passes when throwing 10 or more yards downfield, whether he was pressured or not. He is the real deal. Another helpful running mate with that young man, of course, is the 3rd-ranked guy, Rashad Bateman, Minnesota. There may not be a better route runner in college football than him at this moment in time. He is relatively average as a true freshman in 2018, but he elevated his play in 2019 to an 89 receiver grade that was top ranked in the top 15 overall and top 5 among returners. The 3 biggest things you want to see from the wide receiver are the ability to create separation with route running, the ability to win in contested situations, and the ability to produce after the catch. Bateman is one of the few who can do all 3 on targets of 10 or more passes or 10 or more yards. Bateman hauled in 10 of his 16 contested targets, produced at a top 20 receiving grade, and created a step or more separation on 52% of his throws that were carried his way. So the 6'2", 200-pound wide receiver also tied for 20th in the broken tackles with 17. He was one of the more explosive receivers in the game, and with Tyler Johnson on his way to the NFL, Bateman will get more opportunities to display his elite craft in 2020. So another wide receiver follows that as well. We have Rondale Moore from Purdue. So he had an unfortunate 29 season, limited to just 4 games due to injury, but when healthy, he has proven that he's one of the best wide receivers in college football. In his true freshman campaign in 2018, Moore was the 2nd most valuable wide receiver in the nation, only behind Andy Isabella. His usage was rather unique with the Boilermakers that year. Most of his targets came underneath the coverage on screens, quick slants, and outs. On balls thrown 9 or fewer yards downfield, he saw more than 20 targets than anyone else in the college football atmosphere. He had 118 in total and was one of the 2 receivers to produce a receiving grade above 90. Moore broke a tackle on a 1/3 of these catches and averaged 7.5 yards after the catch per reception. At 5'9", Moore is an athletic freak who squatted 600 pounds and reportedly ran a 4.33 40-yard dash as a freshman and might be a dark horse Heisman candidate if he has a healthy 2020. That might be a stretch because Purdue is Purdue. But, hey. So, I remember when we talked about Micah Parsons way back during his bowl game performance, the linebacker out of Penn State. Well, he's 5th on this list. And he was as solid as a true freshman in 2018, as he was the 7th most valuable first player in his position. In 2019, he went from good to the best in the country, producing the highest Pro Football Focus grade. Parsons' bread and butter was his run defense, where he recorded one of the highest grades of an off-ball linebacker we've seen on the platform, and his tackling against the run was near flawless, recording 17 tackles for loss and no gain, missing only 6 of his 83 attempts. When pass rushing, Parsons consistently made impact plays, recording 23 pressures on his 87 pass rushes. His performance and coverage could be a bit better, but he was by no means a liability in the facet. He didn't give up a touchdown and allowed over 50 yards in just one game in 2019. An amazing prospect. Now we have wide receiver Chris Olave, Ohio State, breakout candidate heading into the year, and the true sophomore lived up to the hype, ranking 28th in Pro Football Focus receiving grade among 426 qualifying wide receivers in 2019. He generated separation with route running as good as any other receiver last year, with 57 of his targets 10 or more yards downfield being deemed open, and that's one of the highest rated among all wide receivers. Number 7 is Ambry Thomas down in Michigan. He didn't play much on defense the first 2 collegiate seasons in 2017 and 2018, but he made his name known as a solid return man on special teams, and he was named a starter at outside corner in 2019 and showed he was more than capable of hanging around with the Big Ten receivers in Michigan's heavy press man scheme. Thomas lined up on press over 81% of his coverage snaps, which was the 4th highest rate in football, and allowed just 53 passer rating on targets thrown his way in that alignment. Among returners, he's one of the best in top 10 press man outside corners. Number 8 is Eric Bruell, Wisconsin. So Wisconsin Badgers safety Eric Bruell has played in the box, slot, and deep safety. So he's one of those guys who can kind of move around among safeties. His year 2 Pro Football Focus coverage grade was among the top 10 best in the FBS, and he is one of the 20 most valuable safeties overall. So this guy is a stud. He was targeted 25 times in coverage last year and just allowed 10 to be caught while combining for 9 interceptions and pass breakups. So he could be one of the best in the country when it's all said and done. Number 9, a guard in Wyatt Davis in Ohio State, and getting a couple starts at the tail end of the 2018 season, performing average at best. Wyatt Davis returned in 2019 as the full-time starter guard and was one of the top guards in the country regardless of draft class. Davis was the 4th most valued guard and among the top 10 most valued offensive linemen overall. On his 459 pass blocking snaps, he didn't allow a single sack or hit and didn't allow a hurry in 5 of his 14 games. As a run blocker, he found himself in the top 5, producing one of the 5 highest run blocking grades among guards. Not only is he one of the best returning offensive linemen in the Big Ten, he's one of the 3 best returning in the college football atmosphere. And then number 10, Tywan Mullen out of Indiana, who was a cornerback. He was a stingy player in coverage as a true freshman in 2019, allowing just 18 of 40 targets to be caught, while also recording the 2nd highest forced incompletion rate among his position at 30%. He appeared in all 13 games for the Hoosiers and starting at the last 8. He held his opponent under 30 receiving yards every single game but one, and rarely did Mullen allow an open target downfield. In fact, over half his targets, 10 or more yards downfield, were contested target, and just 2 of those 23 total targets were to a receiver who had open separation. Mullen clearly has a knack for the football and showed man-to-man skills that are rarely seen by someone his age. The past year true freshman corner class was elite with guys like Derek Stingley Jr., Mikael Wright, Trent McDuffie, and Ahmad Gardner, and Kyer Elm, but Mullen is right there with them and one to watch in 2020. Of course, an honorable mention is Ohio State's Shaun Wade, and was barely behind Mullen for the 10th spot, and is a top 25 defensive back returning to college football in 2020. So there you have it. That's your top 10 and plus one. All right. Thank you for listening to the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I would encourage you all to rate and review us on whatever platform you choose. So Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever you do, listen to us. Please rate and review 5 stars, please, to keep us here. And don't forget to follow our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So that way we can stay communicated, keep you guys up to date, and have a good time all in the same package. This is Ethan for the GSMC College Football Podcast. Thank you all, and see you all next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network, from football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.